yeah, just like you guys can start thinking about what you're looking at here and what the right move might be. It's white to move.
Can you create like a chat for this class where we can type the answers?
Like on the Discord itself, or like, what do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I can create a temporary chat.
I don't know if I even have the rights to make a chat, but if you want, you could just type in the voice chat under voice channels. There's a text channel called No Mic. You can just type there if you don't want to talk out loud.
Okay. I'm just worrying that it might conflict with the beginning chat. That's all.
Oh, right, right. I don't know. Here, let me message Static here. Okay. Yeah. All right, so basically, I'm going to be starting now. Today's class is mostly going to be about middle game ideas. And obviously, as this is the intermediate class, we'll be taking a look at some more advanced middle games. So it won't just be like a one or two move tactical sequence that just wins the game on the spot. But instead, we'll be taking a look at some more complex positions. And then we'll also be breaking down a few chess concepts, such as creating plans using our pawns. And then we'll finally take a look at some games that have been sent to me over the Discord. And then finally, we'll end off by looking at a game between Capablanca and Kotomirsky. Does that sound okay to everyone?
Sounds good. Sounds fine.
All right, great. So here's the very first position that we're taking a look at today. So obviously, I feel like a lot of us will notice a few different things, right? One, we have a very, very nice diagonal here for our bishop. Two, our queen is ready to come in, and obviously, if this knight wasn't here and this pawn wasn't here, we could just play queen down and it'd be a nice checkmate. And secondly, our rook and knight are both very, very active pieces with a lot of possibilities, to essentially just start winning the game very, very quickly. But yeah, in this position, if you guys have any move suggestions, I would appreciate hearing them now.
Knight takes on c6.
Okay, knight takes c6, sure. And if I take with queen, obviously, you take here, right?
Yeah, I'm mainly thinking about queen to h6, telling me mate.
Okay, I'll play queen h6, and to defend, maybe I'll play this.
Okay. Now we get into a position I didn't see.
Yeah, it's a little tough.
You can just take out the bishop whenever you want.
How about going rook h3 after that? And
Okay.
then we make on the h7.
If after something like this, black just has rook f7.
Okay, so there's no mate here.
No, and now we're down a piece, right? We only have one bishop, black has two bishops, so this is actually losing.
I'm guessing a sacrifice on f5 for the knight.
Okay.
You should take the bishop. I think you have to. You should take, so you can get your rook in.
If I take here, then black can just recapture.
I mean, take your rook in and g3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, good idea. Okay, that's excellent. But black doesn't have to take, right? I can just move my bishop somewhere.
No, true. There's a lot of things you can do.
Yeah. So the correct idea in this line is that you have to notice the fact that the rook and the queen can basically fulfill the same job in this position. So knight takes c6 is the correct first move, and after black recaptures, there's a very pretty maiden too, if you guys can find it here. Or three, maiden three.
Type it in the intermediate chat so we don't spoil it for our people. Okay.
Sure. We'll just give like 15 or 20 seconds here to find it. As a hint, it's a queen move. All right. I hope that was enough time.
It's a nice one.
Yeah.
I didn't see it at first. Well, what? Oh yeah, you need to get the knight. Right, that's my c6. Fair enough.
Yeah. Okay. So I think enough people have found it now, but it's essentially just queen takes on h7, and if the king recaptures, then just rook here. And obviously black can delay by a move, but really it's just, it's mate. Right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Great. So in this position, essentially this kind of idea might not be clear from the very beginning, right? But sometimes in chess, ideas kind of just present themselves. So after identifying in this position that you have a very, very strong bishop staring at this diagonal, and that you have a queen and rook that can easily swing over, you should, as you all correctly did, your first instinct was to get rid of this knight, which is excellent. And after getting rid of this knight, you'll see that the tactics become easier and easier to find just because of the fact that we know what kind of pattern we're looking for. And as you get more and more advanced in chess, and you guys are starting to become pretty strong players, you'll have these moments where you're not quite sure why you want to play something, but chances are you probably have some kind of pattern that you're recognizing, and you just want to get to it in a quicker way, which is why you might play something like knight takes c6, even if you don't see the entire pattern here yet, or like the entire sequence with queen takes h7 afterwards. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, great. So let's just move on to the second position here. This is another position where it's white to move, and there's some ideas lurking in the position. Obviously, there's a lot of possible moves, but just feel free to think about them and also to tell me any lines that you want to explore. Okay, so I hope that we've had like a second or two to digest this position. Um, So a good rule in chess, whenever you're just evaluating any position, whether it be for a puzzle or a part of your own game even, you want to start by looking at checks, then captures, and then finally looking at some attacks, okay? Now, there's only one check in this position. It's knight f6, and it's a pretty shitty check because it doesn't do anything. Just knight captures, and there's not much to really continue with there. There are some captures in the position, however. So the first capture you might see is knight takes here. There's also queen takes, bishop takes on a6, and finally bishop takes on d7. So out of those four captures, you can really rule out three of them, right, as being kind of silly. Taking here doesn't do much, taking here doesn't do much, and taking here also doesn't do much. So the line that I want you guys to calculate is bishop takes d7. Just spend around 30 seconds trying to force something in that line. Okay. Yeah, so the idea in this sort of position, after takes and queen takes, does anyone see it? You can just say it out loud if you'd like.
f6.
Knight f6, and if I take?
No, was it rook g3, right?
Yes, rook g3, and after king
And then you
h8.
can take compound. That was it.
Yes, exactly. And we find another very, very pretty mate just because we, again, started by looking at what we could really do. And this isn't something that is extremely difficult, right? Just, I know that we technically went 4 moves ahead in the future. And, some of you might be like, wow, in a real game, I could never calculate 4 or 5 moves ahead. But the truth is, in forcing variations, where every move from your opponent, there's only one possible move, it actually becomes increasingly easy to figure out what you should be playing. Because, and to calculate further, after queen takes is essentially forced here, right? There's no other move for black that really makes sense, otherwise you lose your queen. And then here again, there's no move that makes sense for black. King h8 does not make any sense because you're dropping a queen. So then taking is forced, essentially, and then you see all of this. So I know that this might be a lot to digest, but I want you in your own games as well, and in any puzzles that you might do in the future, to start looking and being able to calculate longer lines. Not because you're gonna be like you're gonna wake up and you're gonna be a strong grandmaster overnight, but just because if you just look at forcing moves, it'll be easier for you to go further and further in any line. So all that being said, let's look at this final position here, the third position of the day. And tell me what you guys see. Where are your eyes going?
You can trap the bishop if you have time to push pawns.
Okay. That's one
I'm
idea.
looking at a backhand.
Okay.
Yeah, if you remove the defender.
Yeah.
You gotta if you deflect the knight, yeah, you get back rank.
Okay. Okay. So you want to take the knight here?
Most likely.
All right.
But then it's an equal position because he just doesn't retake. So I'm just thinking if there's another move. Not equal, we are on advantage and stuff.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. I'm glad that someone mentioned the pawn advantage that we have. It's actually not really a pawn advantage because for this extra pawn, this b pawn, we're down this bishop. So that's the material in the game. We have an extra pawn on the queen side, and we have our beautiful queenside majority against black's minority here. But for that, we're also down this very, very pretty bishop on g6. So we kind of need to make a plan from this very position. And yeah, I kind of want you guys to float any ideas that you might have. So taking the knight was one idea, but what would happen after we take the knight?
He'd probably play pawn h6.
You can also
Okay. Sure.
do knight e7.
Knight e7. Very, very interesting move. And after I just move the king?
Take bishop.
Okay. But then after I take, I mean, now you're just, you've traded material, but you're down material, so it's not something you really want to do. Right? I mean, congratulations. Now you've just made it easier for black to win the game because it's more simple now. Right?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we seem to be having a little bit of difficulty, which is understandable because there's a difficult sequence to really see all of. So I want to take this position and kind of take away all the pieces. So we're just left with the pawns. And when we're looking at just the pawns, what kind of idea immediately strikes out to you? How would you win this as white if it was your move?
Get the king out of there.
Okay. All right. So you'd start moving the king over or something. Any other ideas?
On advantage on the left side.
Yes. Very good. b5, the pawn break. We have a pawn duo here, right? These two against just one lone pawn from black. So the pawn break with b5 is very, very powerful. If white chooses, or if black chooses to take, then we queen, right? Right? This is winning. Everyone agrees. And if black doesn't choose to take, if black plays a king move or something, then, well, first of all, we can just take, or we can push. Everything wins. And yeah. So this is the position with just the pawns, and you'll notice that it's very, very clear from the beginning what our plan should be. We want to use our pawn majority on the queen side, which you guys actually did notice, and create a passed pawn to win the game. So now going back to the position itself, how can we achieve something like that?
Oh, we gotta do the same move. You're gonna deflect the knight.
Okay. So here, I'll give you a hint. Knight takes is the correct move, and obviously something like h6 isn't very good by black because he wants to maintain an advantage. So he plays queen takes, stopping the mate by being able to drop back. So after, if something like takes, check, takes here, then the queen can just drop back, and black isn't losing. but sorry. Yeah, knight takes is correct. What next? Don't be afraid to say your idea. It doesn't have to be correct.
Do we do the sequence of checking anyways, just to get the rook out of the way for our pawn?
Yeah, of course. So, very, very good eye. Just rook e8, rook takes, rook takes, rook takes, queen takes, and after the queen drops back, what do you want to do now?
Trade queens.
Okay. And now?
That just looks insane.
Yeah. Does something work here? Do we have an idea?
It's a loss no matter what you do. There's nothing you can do with your bishop. GG.
Yeah, exactly. b5 just wins here, surprisingly. After pushing b5, we're actually in that same position we were with just the pawns. This bishop isn't going to be able to do anything. Obviously, again, black can't take because I queen, and if black plays a random king move, then I just take and push. If black tries the best defense with bishop d3, then again, we can just push. And there's nothing that black can do, it's just the pawn is too fast. Right? So, this is an interesting puzzle because it can be difficult to make a plan when there's all these pieces on the board. But very, very important it is, when you're trying to figure out a middle game idea, you can try blowing out the position in your head to where it's just the pawns that are left, and you'll find that you have an easier time making a plan when the game itself is simpler, right? And grandmasters talk about this all the time, where they'll say that they never lose an endgame because the endgame is really the simplest area of chess, like objectively speaking, because there's a limited number of like ideas, but it's also the most important to master, and you guys are kind of already on your way to doing that once you start looking at middle game positions and eliminating the pieces in your head or liquefying them and looking at the pawns and letting that guide your idea making, if that makes sense. Yeah?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Great. So that being said, let's take a break from all the positions and take a look at the game that was sent for analysis, or it was just sent and completed games, I believe, between Trick and someone else. So it was a Scotch game with e4, e5, knight f3, c6, and d4. E takes and knight takes, going to the Scotch, and now we have knight takes and queen takes d4. So an idea already from the very beginning here is, why is black choosing to take this, right? There's absolutely no reason for black to really take, and in fact, I would recommend, if you ever play the Scotch, or against the Scotch as black, to just play knight f6. And after knight takes c6, b takes c6, you have this idea of d5 anyways. You're going to get rid of your doubled pawns, and you're essentially ahead in development, if you think about it, because black already has a piece out, whereas white does not, right?
Yep.
Okay, so taking on d4 doesn't like lose the game or anything, but it's kind of like getting rid of a tempo for very little compensation, so I wouldn't recommend. Queen takes c5, queen d1. An interesting idea that is actually theory in the Scotch is queen e5, and after something like queen e7, just trading, and this is sort of your idea. It's that black has a difficult time developing, and this square will always be weak, essentially, and you can very quickly start taking advantage of that with your knight. So that's another idea, but that's kind of specific to the game itself. Let's just continue. After queen d1, queen f6 was played, and oh yeah, here I kind of want to ask for like any ideas. Like as a white player in this position, it's a little difficult to again figure out your plan. But I think that it's advisable in this sort of position to go for just regular development and possibly even throw in an h4 to put your bishop here. So that's sort of like what I'm already seeing. without even having like without really thinking about the position or like calculating any concrete lines. This is going to be like my next three moves in like 90% of cases, just because there's no immediate threats that black can really make. This bishop, I mean, where's it going? Like right here, right? It doesn't look really impressive over here, and this pawn is kind of hampering where the bishop can go. This knight, I mean, if this knight comes out here, it's really only going here. There isn't that many good squares for this knight, and this king is many, many moves away from castling. So I basically, looking at this position, I have that idea of being able to play h4, put my bishop on g5, and bring my knight to c3. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great. Bishop d3 was played, b6, castles, bishop d7, knight c3, bishop d6, which looks a little awkward, and it'll be taken advantage of. Unfortunately, our hero, Trick, didn't play this correctly. He just played e5, and it would be nice if we had a pawn on f4 supporting this, because then it would be, a fork. But unfortunately, black can just take, which he did. And now, what's the obvious move here for white?
Rook e1.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Identifying the idea that's lurking in the position. And this is probably why Trick played this, because he saw this maneuver that is very, very common in some Roy Lopez lines, as well as just this is a common idea after you castle early and your opponent's king is still left in the center. Here, his opponent played d6, and now what would you play in this position to take advantage of this pin?
You push the pawn f2 to f4.
Yes, exactly correct. This bishop cannot move, and if the queen takes, then just bishop takes, and if black plays a random move, then I can just take your bishop, right? So if Trick had found that, he would have won the game, but he didn't. Instead, he played knight d5, which is a little strange. It's not like a blunder. I mean, it is a blunder, but it's not like throwing away material, because his idea is that after bishop takes d5, he just plays bishop b5 check, winning the bishop back. Here's another idea that I kind of want to discuss very, very briefly. His opponent chose to play king d8, which is a little questionable, and would have been much better to just play king f8. Now, why? Well, just because of the fact that you have these two major pieces staring down your king, and you're gonna have an unpleasant time if you try and stay in the center. So it's much better to just accept that you're not going to be able to castle, go this way, bring your knight out, maybe play g6 someday, tuck your king away, bring your rook into the center, and enjoy a nice, or not a nice game. It'll still be a rough game, but at least you have some chances. But instead, by playing king d8, you're just staying in the center of the board. Well, it'll be easier for white's pieces to really attack you. So queen takes d5, rook c8, and queen b7. So this game kind of devolves just a little bit because his opponent allows him to pick up all these pawns for no reason. And here, Trick plays bishop f4, which is a little bit of a weird move, but it makes sense. His idea is that if his opponent plays bishop takes f4, then what's the threat?
Rook to e8. It's guarded by the bishop.
Yeah, exactly, and that's just checkmate. So that's his idea. His opponent plays queen takes f4, but now Trick had the idea of playing queen takes d6, which is very, very impressive, right? And obviously his opponent blundered into it by playing bishop takes d6 and falling for the mate. But even if his opponent had moved his king, I mean, now I can just pick this piece up whenever I want. I have this check. I have a lot of ideas to play with. And honestly, I'd probably play rook takes here. Looks very strong, looks very nasty, and I'm threatening rook there on the next move. So, yeah, very, very impressive game by Trick. However, a little strange that he missed some ideas, but he had the basic theme of the Scotch down, and I think he played it well. So, yeah. If you want your games analyzed as well, and like for example in next week's lesson, feel free to send it in completed games and just tag me, or you can even just send it like to me as a Discord DM, and I'll consider taking a look at it with everyone. Okay, so Next, I kind of wanted to take a look at just this random position and identify some weaknesses. So, what is something that stands out to you here? What are you looking at?
Whose move is it?
Sorry, what? Somebody asked a question?
It's not about the moves. It's just about like what weak squares and pieces.
Yes, yes.
Well, I mean, clearly white has a bishop and black has no major pieces.
Right. But how can we really make use of this bishop?
You probably want to get it to attack the pawn that is stuck on C6.
Yes, very good. So you've already identified that black's major weakness in this position that we can exploit is this c6 pawn. And even if this was a more cluttered position, example, like just any random game with like a bunch of rooks, some knights just scattered around, even then, the c6 pawn would most likely be a weakness because there's no pawns that can support it, right? So this is an idea and a pattern that I want you to take a look at in your own games by identifying pawn weaknesses in particular and using that to sort of build your plan. So, just bishop h3 here, and after some trades, white is just clearly his king is better. He has this piece here to take advantage of, and it's just a winning endgame. But given that, how can we create weaknesses now that you know how to identify them? In this sort of position, what would you really play here?
Pawn e5.
Okay, why?
Theme of creating weaknesses.
Okay, what weaknesses does e5 create?
Doubled pawns.
Okay, what else?
Shades are outpost with knight, and it opens line to the
Sorry about that, Alf. Could you say that again? A little difficult to hear you.
Shades an outpost. Shades an
Uh-huh.
outpost via knight,
Right?
and it shades an open line via rook.
Yeah, exactly. It creates some very, very nice files for your rook, and it creates an outpost for the knight. And there's one more thing that e5 does. I'm gonna give it like 10 more seconds and then, yeah?
It leaves the pawn on C4 exposed.
Yeah,
That's not C4.
c5, yeah.
That's C5.
Yeah,
C5.
exactly. So that those are the three things that the move e5 does. And I'm glad that it comes to you naturally and that it's something that you're looking at already. But yeah, it's sort of an obvious move. And the reason is, well, first of all, I gain a tempo. I have a very, very nice outpost for my knight. My rook is gonna look at these weakened pawns. And also, it creates this weakness that black can actually immediately just capture. And now there's another situation here. I mean, this bishop is sort of dominated by my knight because I can just play something like b4 here, and you're never getting rid of my knight. And this bishop can't go anywhere because of this knight. You'll see this often when the bishop and the knight are two squares away from one another, like this. One piece is typically dominating the other. And it depends on the position. Sometimes we say the bishop dominates the knight, right? Because the knight can't do anything. But in that same way, this bishop is also dominated by our knight because the bishop has no squares. It has no moves. I mean, what's really going to happen here, right? Does that make sense? And we can not only use our queenside majority to win this game, but we can also have a more active rook that comes in and creates a lot of chaos for our opponent. Okay. So I hope that's clear, and it's a theme that you carry on with in your own games of creating the weaknesses, of finding the right squares to take a look at and whatnot. So moving on.
Can I ask something about it?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you go knight d6? You're not taking the pawn and sleep at knight d6. Forks those two, so probably rook f8, and then you can get your rook into on e8 pawn. because these pieces are way worse than before, in my opinion.
Um,
It doesn't work at all. Okay, now I see what you mean.
yeah, no, I mean, your idea isn't bad. I'm sure that this is still winnable, but now the position looks a little more equal, right? Compared to before.
Yeah, you can still fork them and just take the pawn though.
Oh yeah, yeah. You can
But
just
you've given him improvement.
yeah,
So
yeah. I suppose so. Yeah, I agree. This is probably better. Good job. Okay. So we're gonna take a look at one more game that was sent in the Discord. It was between Alf and someone else, and I think ignore the ratings. I don't know what platform they played this on, but yeah. Anyways, this was the Slav defense. So D4, D5, C4, and C6. It's similar to the Karo Khan, but different because white has a C pawn instead of an E pawn here. Otherwise, it'd be the Karo. But yeah. Anyways, knight C3 and a6 by his opponent, which is a little weird, but it's okay. Knight f3, and now h6, which is very, very weird. So in this position, our hero, Alf, played c5, which is a little weird. Um, it's not like a bad move or anything, but the ideas that really stand out to me here is sort of to leave this tension between the pieces, because it's typically in any given chess position, when a piece can be when two pawns are attacking one another, and either can make a capture, it's typically best, not always, but typically as a rule of thumb, to just leave them there and continue upholding the tension in the center of the board. And this is something that you'll come to like more and more as you continue doing it in your games, because you'll find that it might give you little advantages that you otherwise wouldn't have seen. So a way to continue this position that I would have pursued is something like e4, all right, challenging the center again, and if takes, then I just have a nice knight, and if he doesn't take, then I just play bishop f4 the next move, and I have very, very nice development, everything makes sense, and if my opponent ever captures, then I just have my bishop there to recapture. So I just find c5 weird because yes, it controls this square in particular, but it also gives up control of this square, and I don't know. It's not best to just liquefy the tension the way that was done in this game. Bishop g4, not a bad move again. It's just a little weird, but allows for knight e5, which Alf took advantage of immediately. After bishop h5, g4, very good using the knight. And after bishop g6, just capturing. And now, again, very, very clear-cut ideas for me is to take advantage of this weakness by either putting our queen on this diagonal, or technically this diagonal as well, I guess, and also to push e4 to open up the center even more because of the fact that black has a delayed development compared to us, and that black will lose a lot of tempo whenever we decide to attack this pawn, if that makes sense. So e4 is like on the agenda for me. Okay? Okay, so just continuing. Bishop f4, knight f6, queen b3, and going after this pawn, and queen d7 by our opponent. And from here, what's the idea, or like what stands out to you in this position, looking at it now?
The idea you showed earlier, attacking the pawn on g6 by moving your queen back to c2, is probably a good idea.
Okay. What else?
Well, no, his knight and rook are practically not moving
Yeah.
like if you see in the future. So they're
Yeah.
kind of stuck. So just continue development.
Okay.
But
you have a hanging pawn as well.
Yeah, we do have this pawn that's hanging, so we could like consider protecting it or something. I'll do that one in blue as well. And what's one more idea that you guys might see in this position?
Push the pawn, g5.
G5. Oh wow.
Yeah, you don't have to defend it, you just push it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think G5, I play something like knight e4.
Yeah. Yeah, you could still like build it up then, because if it takes a knight, it's not the worst thing, I think.
Yeah, yeah. This
Because he's wasting so many moves, you're just getting bounced up and more in the face.
Yeah, yeah, good, exactly. I think this actually comes up in a later in the game as well. But okay, anyways, the idea that really stands out to me, I mean, all of this is great ideas. The fact that we can just continue development, the fact that we can target this pawn, the fact that we can protect this pawn. But what really stands out to me in this position is the fact that this square is very, very, very weak for black. And black's dark square bishop might as well not exist. So all of his dark squares really are pretty weak. But this one in particular, the one on b6, is the one that I want to take advantage of. And basically, I would almost play knight a4 here without even blinking in a blitz or bullet game, just because it creates the immediate threat of knight b6, right? If black plays some random move, the knight b6, forking. And also, it really opens the way up for starting some sort of attack on the queen side. I can even swing over my queen to this side of the board and go in with my bishop. And even castling queenside, pushing e4, f3, e4 even. So yeah, this is the idea that I see, and it might be something to think about in your games as well. Take a look at the pawns and really the kind of squares that they control. The fact that all of black's pawns are, sorry, on light squares and black's light square bishop is basically not to be found anywhere. It means that you want to be taking advantage of these dark squares. Does that make sense? It's a very difficult concept. I mean, it's easy to like say and to like just be like, oh, of course, dark squares are weak for black, so I take advantage. But it can be difficult to identify it in the game. So always ask yourself that kind of question. What squares are weak? What squares are strong? Where do my pieces want to be? Knights enjoy outposts like this. So again, just another idea. You want that piece there. So yeah, that's what I would see in that position. But anyways, continuing what actually happened in the game. Queen d7. We played h3, protecting the pawn, which is classified as an inaccuracy. So yeah, knight a4 is best, as recommended by Stockfish. Yay. But continuing, a5, a little strange. E3, g5, bishop e5, knight a6. So again here, I mean, I don't know. I really feel like this idea should really be standing out, especially now that this knight is out here. I mean, this rook can never come to this square. I'm controlling everything. I don't know. It feels like knight a4 should really not have been overlooked here by Alf. But anyways, continuing, a3. And here, after knight e4, I don't like what Alf did. So what Alf did was he played knight takes e4, which obviously makes sense. I mean, now black's pawn structure is terrible. Like, these guys can never really support one another. But also, if we just continued developing with some random move like, bishop here or just bishop here, it makes more sense than capturing because we're essentially losing a tempo. Because what are we really afraid of? If we just played a random move like this, then why are we afraid of something like this? Just captures, captures. And now I'm attacking something anyways. My pawn structure is completely fine. And our opponent has wasted two moves in which we've improved our queen slightly and we've improved our bishop. So there's no harm, again, in just letting this tension stay in the middle of the board. And just because you can capture something doesn't mean that you should. Okay? So yeah, this is a problem that a lot of beginner players in particular tend to make a lot, where they see a possible capture and they just have to go for it. They can't just sit there and relax. If they see a capture, they have to take it. But anyways, don't do that.
I just have a question. If you go back, and let's say I develop the bishop and he takes my knight in that line.
Right?
Okay, so this is a possible line.
Right?
Go back to the line I played.
Okay.
Here, but like, isn't this better because he has more weaknesses?
Yes, technically it is better. Well, okay, that was stupid of me then, right? Okay. So, all right, let me try and think here.
The concept you said was good.
Right.
Like,
okay, yeah, I think you're right. My bad. I think I made a mistake there. I think you're absolutely right. And just in this position in particular, what you played was fine. I guess it was a wrong time to teach the right concept there. My bad. Sorry. Uh,
No, no
yeah,
problem.
no, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's no way to get rid of this weakness. If that didn't exist, then Queen D4 would be strong in this sort of position. But just because of the fact that we have this glaring weakness here, this doesn't work. But yeah, okay, my bad. Yeah, and sorry. Just let's just continue. Let's pretend that didn't happen. Apologies, Alf. Uh, your opponent sacrificed this pawn, and he doesn't really have any ideas here because of the fact that this rook is unprotected. If these rooks were connected, right, then black would have this sort of idea where he can capture freely without, and launching an attack on the queen. But unfortunately, in this situation, this rook is just undefended, so that doesn't quite work. After something like queen d5 here by your opponent, you played queen c2, which is considered an inaccuracy, and it's considered an inaccuracy for a very, very interesting reason. So I want you to sort of find the move for black here. It doesn't like lose the game or anything, obviously, but it just gives black some unnecessary counterplay. So what would you play as black in this position?
I mean, knight b4, 6-0.
Yeah, that is the correct idea. Obviously, I cannot capture because then my rook falls and I start crying. And once this queen moves, right? Well, first of all, since this knight is now under attack, it has to move. But fortunately, it can even come to something like d3 here, because the only way you're moving this knight is by capturing with your queen. There's no other piece that can really do it. Like, this rook is just too slow, right? Like, you need to invest like 3 moves to make that happen, which just means that it's not happening. And after just takes, like, you basically traded off what used to be a really shitty knight on all the way on a6 for a fairly okay bishop here on g2. So, let me just play that line out here. Um, I mean, ignoring the fact that black's pawns look kind of iffy, just taking the fact that we traded a knight on a6 for bishop on g2 when this knight literally did not have a future, right? This knight's best attempt at figuring out what to do with his life was to go back and like maybe somehow circle around like this. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Let me know if there's anything that I'm doing wrong here. Um, After Black's queenside castle, I feel like a very, very simple idea that should have been acted on immediately is a move like b4 or even just a4 and then somehow supporting b4 later and pushing for b5. It should be very obvious that black doesn't really have some sort of strong attack, and I would even consider playing something like f3 and just moving my king up or something, even to f2 because this bishop isn't moving anytime soon, and just swinging my rook over and pushing these pawns. That's sort of the idea that comes into my head immediately. Instead, Alf played queen a4, which makes sense. He wants to prep this, I would imagine. Here, his opponent played e6, and here he just played bishop takes c6. Very, very sound sacrifice, makes complete sense. The engine here, I think, technically prefers taking here, but it's kind of difficult to understand that as a human, right? Because after knight back, I mean, obviously, yes, like, white is winning, but we tend to prefer just being up material because it's simplest for us, which is completely fine. Here, I don't agree with Alf's move. He played queen takes f7. I think that it makes much, much more sense to just play taking the pawn because I mean, how is this bad for white in any way, right? I mean, simplifying is good, but being up material is also good. So yeah. Oh, and this is another point that I kind of want to touch on. Here, our hero chose to castle, which I find a little bit strange. And the reason I find it strange is because at this point in the game, there is no longer any queens on the board, and there are no knights either. And when queens in particular have been traded off, your king is pretty safe in the center of the board. Even if my king was all the way over here on e4, I wouldn't be afraid of getting checkmated just because there's no queen on the board to checkmate me with, right? So it doesn't make
You just
sense.
lose tempo,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, castling just doesn't make
Rather
sense.
just scrape the pawns.
Yeah, precisely. Our king is all the way in the corner, and we know that the way that we're going to win this game, again, I know I've said this a lot, but just look at the way that the pawns are pointing, okay? The way that we win this game is by pushing this pawn. So how does it make any sense to take the king, which is very, very strong, approaching the end game, into a corner, right? It doesn't make sense. It would usually we castle for king safety, but there's nothing for the king to be safe from. So in this case, I would have much preferred to see something like just king e2 or even king d2, and then swinging this rook over again and pushing this pawn, because that's how this game is going to be won. This pawn is going to promote, or one of these three pawns are going to promote, like guaranteed. But yeah, bishop e7, continuing, b4, finally starting to push. So here again we have this queenside majority, and typically it's think of it this way, right? If we have one pawn against 0 pawns, then we win. If there's 2 pawns against 1 pawn, then we have to simplify and then we win. 3 against 2, same thing, and then 4 against 3. Now you're getting into some dicey territory, and in some endgames that's not even winning. Here we have on the queen side, like on this half of the board, we have 4 pawns against just 1. So it makes the most sense to just trade this off immediately and make it 3 versus 0 so that we can just march it down plainly. And the fact is, after we push something like this, right, we have 2 connected passed pawns here. Like, these guys are never going to be stopped. And technically this guy is connected as well, but he's not quite passed yet because of this pawn here. But like these 2 pawns just by themselves should be able to win the game. A5 is just strange because now b5 is hard to justify. And now your pawns are going to be disconnected. You're letting this pawn be of more use than it should be. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great. So g6.
Also, right, if you could choose one pawn out of the 3 you want to promote, you want it to be the middle one so you can trade with your bishop.
Excellent eye for that as well. The fact is we have a dark squared bishop and it controls the b8 queening square. So yes, very, very good point. And I'm glad that you noticed that. So yeah, we definitely want this pawn to be the one that promotes on the b file because of the fact that we have a bishop guarding that square. Okay, a6, rook a8, and now you can kind of see, right? Like this pawn is really far up. Like we moved it 1, 2, 3 times, or actually I think 4 times. But now it's almost a weakness. I mean, how do you want to defend this pawn? The only way we can really defend this pawn is like putting both of our rooks there. But then our rooks are sort of going to be caught up, and black can just, play his idea, or sorry, bring his rook over as well, and now we're kind of just stuck when we shouldn't be. We should be able to play b5, but we just can't in this position, which is really sad. We play e4, because there's not much else left to do. Rook a7, rook fd1, preparing the d4 push, and his opponent doubles, threatening to win this pawn, and now there's no way for us to protect it. So we kind of wasted a lot of time there. Because, 1, 2, 3, 4 moves just to get rid of the pawn in the end for nothing, when we could have played something like b5 earlier, and then...
castling as well.
Sorry?
And castling as well.
Yeah, we wasted a lot of tempo. And obviously the engine evaluation is going to be the same. It's going to be like plus 10 no matter what, because, the game is won. But coming from a human perspective, especially in a game, if this is a faster game, like a 5 or even a 3-minute game, then you're wasting a lot of tempo and your opponent might somehow swindle you, or you might misclick or something might go wrong, and it's just unnecessary risk that you shouldn't be taking. So very, very, like the game almost slipped away is what I'm trying to say. But I mean, obviously we're still winning. We get rid of this pawn, but it's okay. We still have 2 connected passed pawns. No way we can lose, right? Unfortunately, oh, sorry.
They can't making big assertions.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we trade a pair of rooks here, and okay, trading rooks is fine. Sometimes in endgames you don't even want to trade, even when you're up material. And the idea is, why don't you want to trade? Well, if his king is more active than our king, then chances are the more we trade, the closer we get to possible stalemating chances for black. And I know that sounds like ridiculous, but literally 20 moves down the line, if everything gets traded off and this black king is able to get where it needs to be and keep an eye on both of these pawns, then I know this is like very like fantasy almost. It might seem like I'm speaking crazy here, but in some ideas, especially when the kings are different like this, if this king was over here, then I would definitely say that trading is not good. But with this king here, it's a little debatable whether or not we should trade. But essentially, the idea is the less pieces you have, the closer you get to stalemate. Anyways, rook d7, which is just a mistake, but don't worry too much about it. I mean, like, the trade itself is even. Your opponent finally spots this idea, by the way, of taking this pawn. Obviously, after takes, he just wins a pawn for no reason. He misses it for one move, but then he sees it the next move. So yeah. And here, you play the very, very strange rook b6, just offering this trade. And your opponent obviously cannot just take because of the fact that you're trying to run your pawn, and after the king is over here, it wastes too much time because your king gets in through like this, right? That's the idea. Let me just show that line real quick. Even though, yes, the king is in time to stop the queen, we can just march our king up, and this is clearly winning, right? Actually, is it clearly winning? No, this isn't even clearly winning, so terrible. Terrible, terrible. Like rook b6. The engine, yeah, the engine is already evaluating as even here at 0.3. So yeah, unfortunate. But anyways, you guys end up trading, and now this is just a drawn endgame, or it should be. But your opponent messes up here, and pretty instructionally. After king e5, if your opponent just maintains the opposition here, the opposition is, when there's just one square, I'm sure you guys already know this, between the two kings, uh, there's nothing that white can do to make progress. I mean, essentially, wherever I go, you just follow me. If I go this way, you follow me. If I go this way, you follow me back. If I do something like stepping back, then fine. You just step back and you maintain this distant opposition. Well, it's not distant really, but like this diagonal opposition, right? And now if I move back, then you're here again in time. And this is a concept that, you see being taught a lot, but just like this anyways, it's something good to keep in mind. We'll go to the rest of the game. Sorry, yeah?
Something just came up. I have to go. Really, really interesting. I learned a lot, like with the not trading pieces, if the king's more active, pawn structures, the simplification of pawn structures, and looking queenside, kingside, all of that was new to me. So thank you for this. You did a great job. Anyway, see ya.
Okay. Thank you for that, Alf. But yeah, the game just ends in an unfortunate stalemate because Alf, instead of playing g7, I think that's why he actually left. He didn't want to embarrass himself. Instead of playing g7 with the mate in 6, he played h7, stalemating in 1. So not very impressive there. But all right, yeah, we only have around 10 minutes left. We'll take a look at Capablanca and Kodomirsky, and that'll be the end of today's lesson. So yeah, so just to end
In the
off.
tournament, one time I got a queen and king versus king, and I did stalemate. Probably the most embarrassing thing in all of my chess.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
But it's
no.
probably need to study the end game like that. Like as if one of the first things you should study.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think when I was being taught chess, it was one of the first things that my grandpa and my father taught me, like how to mate with a queen, how to mate with two rooks, like stuff like that. Yeah, I definitely think that's one of the best ways to start playing chess. Okay. Anyways, so this is Capablanca. He has the white pieces, and obviously since it's Capablanca, you already know he's going to win. But in this position, the engine says pretty much equal. I think it's like zero point 0.5 or zero point 0.6 for white, but nothing to really like write home about. Here in this position, I want you guys to just point out everything you see, just rapid fire. Like, what's happening?
Get the knight out, get it to b3.
Oh, this knight. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
the white knight. Yeah, the white knight.
Okay.
Attack the weak pawn.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What else?
Hanging bishop for black.
Okay. A loose bishop. Yeah.
C6, but you can get your knight to A5 with a B3 thing, he said.
Right. Okay.
You can sort of get out of the bishop and then you can just march down middle because he has that pawn middle. So
Yeah. His center is a little worse than ours because of the fact that he has these two awkward pawns, and we have some ideas of this pawn break, right? And I'm glad that you mentioned that about with the pawns because his knight isn't in place really to be contesting the center. We've heard this a million times, but a knight on the rim is dim, right? Like this knight isn't controlling the right squares that it needs to be controlling. So if this knight was like on f6 or even on like here, this would be fine. But this isn't fine for white and or sorry for black. And Kawablanka starts capitalizing immediately by playing e5. His opponent plays g6 and e6 and rook f8. Okay, so already you can see that this position, just two moves down the line, with how Capablanca played it, is starting to look pretty good for white. He brings his knight out, playing slowly. There's no need to rush and capture. Uh, why is this capture bad? Oh, okay, I drew the arrow before. Sorry. But this capture by black doesn't exactly work because of the fact that we have this move. And now we're threatening this sort of sacrifice and, bring our knight in for some sort of mating threat eventually. And we are also threatening just taking here on e6 with check. So that's why f takes e6 isn't very good. His opponent played queen b7, pinning this pawn. Knight f5, kind of marrying tactics with chess, or sorry, with strategy rather. If obviously g takes f5, then we go into the pretty line of queen takes f5, and now it's kind of hard to stop this checkmate, right? Like, I mean, yes, you can run all the way out, but I mean, come on, this is just ridiculous, right? There's no way that black is surviving this sort of attack. So, anyways, after knight f5, if something like king h8, then just queen e4, and after f takes, knight takes, queen takes, then we just have d takes e6. And this is just a nicer position for white to play. We have the queen and the bishop in the, the queen and the bishop in the middle of the board. This rook is going to come down like this. So maybe someday there, this pawn is going to fall. And overall, a nice position to enjoy as white. So anyways, knight f5, f takes e6 now works because there's no longer this bishop takes on g6 idea. I hope you guys understand that. And after d takes e6, queen c7, and queen c6. And obviously, black cannot take the free hanging queen because it loses to this tactic, right? And instead, his opponent played queen d8, but even now, just knight takes e7, queen takes, and now we have bishop takes. And this knight is looking, again, very, very awkward here. And after a couple more moves, like, his opponent just resigned. Because there's no way that you can stop this pawn from just marching up as black. I mean, yes, there's some ideas to delay it, but eventually this rook is going to come sit here, this pawn is going to march down the board, and the Capablanca is going to enjoy yet another nice victory. But yeah, any questions about that game in particular? No? Okay. Any questions overall? This is where you guys.
Any ideas of h6, like knight h6 later? Like previously?
Sorry.
If you go back a few moves.
Okay. Time when to stop. Oh, here. Okay. Sorry. Knight h6. Interesting line. This rook is unfortunately guarded, but otherwise this would be really strong. But I mean, just king here, right? And now, yeah, this knight is actually lost, isn't it? You actually don't have any way. Yeah. I mean, like you go back and check probably is best or something, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I was looking at something else. Maybe.
Sorry, what were you looking at? Even earlier, like here. I mean, this is the earliest that we can play knight h6, right? There's, yeah. Even here, knight h6 is still an idea, but just this again. And now we still have no way of defending this knight. Same problem we run into.
Okay.
Okay. But yeah. Any questions overall? I kind of wanted to explore an opening today as well, but I wasn't sure what to explore, and I figured I'd ask you guys today at the end of this class what you guys want to see for next time. Like I have some repertoires that I could share if you want.
An
Yeah.
opening that I'm very keen on is Petrov's Defense.
Okay. All right, I'll write that down.
That's about it.
That is some Italian game on the attack that was a bit different than normal, so it's difficult. I remember something different, I think.
Yeah, yeah, the Italian is a complicated one. I mean, people grandmasters have stopped playing it just because it's too sharp. Like everyone's averse to it, and
No,
sorry, yeah.
yeah, that's why I played a bit different, so it's not that difficult.
Oh, okay. If you wanna
It's
send,
some,
yeah.
yeah, it's very basic. Like normally you just get your d4, but I get c3 and then d4, so it's just a bit
Oh,
more
okay.
stabilized stuff.
Right, right.
And
One
then I
of
have like a bombs and some other things.
right, one of my favorite openings that I probably play the most of is uh is the Roy Lopez. I don't know why my computer is so slow. I think it's because I'm screen sharing to Discord. Yeah. I have quite a few studies, but okay. Anyways, I think this one has my Roy Lopez. Yeah. I'll look into the Italian as well as the Petrov, and we can like start on it. But if you guys want, we can also explore the Roy Lopez for next time. I have like a nicely like annotated study here with a lot of interesting lines that could be played into essentially. But yeah. That's pretty much the end of the hour. I'd like to thank you for, coming out and being a part of this week's lesson. I really, really do appreciate it. If you guys have any questions, then feel free to either, just post it on the Discord or message me directly. If you're also interested in individual coaching, then please DM me for that. I'm always up for it. It would be completely free. And yeah, thank you all for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank
Could you
you
just send me that?
coaching.
Yeah. Could you send me that that game of Elf, because I kind of struggled with this end game, so just wanted to go over it.
Okay, the end game with, sorry, just a
With
general.
Elf.
Okay, that one in
Yeah,
particular.
the one with Elf.
Okay.
Yeah. I still have no clue. I would have probably still done it wrong.
Okay.
So yeah, just wanted to look at it myself a bit, just explore.
All
There's
right.
a concept in the very end of that game. There's a concept called squeeze.
What's
If you want it's a concept called squeeze. It's how you get the queen out of the corner.
Okay. Oh, you mean like, sorry, the king out of the corner, right? Like black's king out of the corner there?
Yeah. Oh yeah. King.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah. No, Casper, just DM me. We can look at that, like, actually, like, right now if you want, right after this lesson is over.
Yeah, be up for it. We can stay in this class if you want to.
Oh, yeah, we can do that as well. Okay,
Otherwise, you just have to switch around all of it.
yeah. All right, is that all for today? If so, then I'd like to thank everyone for joining again, and class dismissed.
Alright, see ya.
See ya. Thank you for coming. See you guys next week. Okay.
Alright.
Yeah. Let me stop recording this. My battery's also low. All right.